So well, actually I got asked, do you mind? I got asked last night about, what was it? I think it was 11 o'clock at night, I saw your email, if I would do this talk today. And did I have a topic? And I thought about it, and having been here the last time and listening to something about spiritual stuff, I thought, oh, yeah, I'll do it. Living a magical life, because I actually think it's pretty damned important, especially now, that we live magical lives. And I guess where we need to start is, well, what is a magical life? And that means, what is magic? Because many people, they hear the word magic and they think you're nuts, or they think Harry Potter, or they think stage trickery. And actually, it's none of those things. What magic is working on yourself within a sort of certain set of constraints or beliefs. So to be magical is to have a certain attitude based on who you are. So there are lots of techniques they can use to have a magical life. And one of them, for example, is that you could treat every glass of water or beer or whatever it is you drink in coffee as a magical act. You can suggest to yourself that this water has some quality, health, strength, whatever you want, and you drink it and you believe that you are taking on board the quality that you have put in the water. You can do the same thing with food. You can do the same thing in the shower. I know that Sean often talks about getting around a fire and watching the embers being a human thing to do. You can imagine that that fire is burning away the unwanted aspects of your own personality and yourself. And you can take all that on board in meditation and actually go through a meditative exercise in your own mind of performing all of these things in order to unwrap yourself from all the bandages that have been put on you by your parents, your school, your politicians, your culture, the people you know, your girlfriend, your wife, because you are multiple people and you're a different person to every person that knows you, but there's one true person and that's inside of you. Who are you? So you can use magic, ritual magic, where you dance around stone circles dressed in silly costumes. That is the same thing. You are dressing a part. You are taking on a form. You are acting out a part. It's just the same thing as an affirmation, except it's done in a more grandiose format. And, where do I have my expertise from when I come to talk about magic? Well, I studied for almost a decade with a school of magic in the UK called the Servants of the Light, which is basically an offshoot of the Golden Dawn. So I've done ritual magic, I've done all kinds of exercises. I know all about the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life and all of that stuff. And I've come to believe that, magic should be a part of everybody's life. And in fact, if we go back in time, magic was a part of everybody's life because we had myth and superstition, and we saw shapes in trees and we saw gods in hilltops. And this was how life was conducted. And why is it important to have a magical life? Well, it's important because increasingly we're being driven towards transhumanism. We're all hooked into iPhones and machines and soon artificial intelligence. And we're being encouraged maybe to take a chip in the brain and become part human, part evil, in my opinion. And we're losing our roots. Our roots are is that we're biological animals that were raised on a planet called Earth, and we're in tune with the frequencies of this planet. This Earth resonates with multiple frequencies. And, astronauts that go into space feel the difference when they leave those frequencies. These frequencies are a part of ourself. And living a magical life is something where life becomes an adventure. And I was talking to you just earlier on about an example that came up yesterday. I was listening to a YouTube video by an Irish gentleman called Thomas Sheridan, and he was talking about when he was a kid, he and his friend who was a girl, they used to cross lots of the Irish landscape to go to school, walk 3 miles to go to school through the forest and through the meadow and the river valley. And to make it more interesting, and because they were both fans of Lords of the Rings, they'd make it very Tolkien-esque, and they'd make up animals and figures and creatures in the landscape. And eventually what they discovered was that by approaching the landscape in a magical way, magic started to happen. They would see things and observe things that other people didn't. Probably it was there all the time, but they had their eyes open to it. And that these things would take on significance. And eventually They started to see auguries. You know, a snake crossed their path. What does a snake crossing your path mean? It's got some meaning. There was a storm. What does the storm mean? It's got some meaning. And so basically, life becomes an adventure. So for the last few years, what I've done, this is not an advertisement, it's just an example. This book is actually a compilation of 3 books. It's called Connecting with the Land. And it's about my journey when I broke up with my Czech girlfriend, which destroyed me, absolutely destroyed me. And for a period of time, I was like, you know, couldn't figure out what I was going to do, where I was going to go. And one evening, I was walking my daughter's dog, and we used to live in Pelikovar by the castle, underneath the castle there. And there's lots of these little seating areas where people sit on the side of the castle and see Brno. And I walk around and it's dark, and I see this bag, this rucksack, and I thought, that's a bit weird. Somebody must have left their rucksack in the middle of the path. As I got a bit closer, on the other side of the rucksack was laid out what looked like a skeleton. What the hell's this? And I went and looked at it, and it was made of stones and bones and antlers and goodness knows what. And I'm looking at it thinking, what the hell is going on here? And then I saw this gentleman running towards me, and he had a little drum, one of those things that you do this and the things whip around the drum and make a beat. And he was mumbling to himself. He totally ignored me. And I thought, okay, you know, I shouldn't be here. So I walked a bit further. But then I walked around and I stood looking down at him, and he knew I was watching him. I knew I was watching him. And what happened was, by going back the next morning and trying to figure out what was he doing, I found a stone design laid out in the grass, and I found some burned roses and things like this. And over the next 3 months, every single day I went and photographed those, and I started to move some of the stones. I'd put my own stones in and he'd move them back out again. And we started to play this game. I never met the man, by the way, never met the man. And what I realized was that nobody else ever saw these stone designs. They're just blindly looking in the phone, looking at whatever, talking to each other. They never saw these stone designs. Yet I had all these stone designs photographed. And furthermore, there were 2 sites where he had stone designs either side of my house. One was all natural, and the other one he would use other things like kids' shoes, pots and pans, knives and forks, and he would make these designs. Now, I couldn't figure out what the hell he was doing, but that was one day I thought, I wonder if it's something to do with energies. So I got myself a dowsing rod, and I went out and started dowsing the energies, and sure enough, I found that there seemed to be some energetic lines. Then I went up on the castle site, started dowsing the castle site, and found all these lines running through the castle. And this took me on this magical adventure that I call Connecting with the Land. And in here, you'll see that you start to see the world in a completely different way. You start to see how subtle energies influence everything we do, impact our well-being. You start to understand yourself. So I wrote The Secret in my way, the new you, right? And this book is about how to become a magical individual, how to take a magical view on life, and how it can work for you. And the way it works for you is that you start to read the world around you. You're co-creating this reality by who you are and how you see it. And that's quantum physics as well, by the way, if you want to have that conversation at lunch. So you're shaping the world by the way you see it. So by working on yourself, stripping away all these preconceived ideas about what things are and how things should be, you start to see the world differently. And then the world starts talking back to you because you get these synchronicities, coincidences that keep on happening, like the shaman guy. And if you follow them, they take you on the path you're supposed to be on. Now, how does that impact business? Well, for me, that's now I realize how I conduct my successful business of commodities. I never worry about where the next dollar's coming from. I never worry about where the next customer is coming from. I simply have the attitude that there will be success. I will be successful. I will have a customer, and I will be financially secure. And it's amazing because projects drop out. You know, one day you're thinking, I'm going to have a shortfall next month, and the next thing the phone rings and somebody says, "Hey, Gary, I need you to do this for me. 15 grand. Is that enough?" And projects start dropping out the tree. So, I'm rushing a bit because I don't want to take all the time of the meeting. But if you start to see the world in a magical way, all sorts of weird and wonderful things start happening to you. And if you allow that to permeate who you are and how you approach life. So for example, there's all kinds of conflict going on right now. Iran, Israel, Russia, Ukraine, there's all this fear-mongering, climate change. And do you know what? It's all noise. Just forget it. Just focus on two things. Being creative in your way, whether that's art, poetry, business, whatever it is, be creative. And secondly, get out into nature, connect with the planet that you are a part of and become a part of nature. And all of a sudden, all that stuff just fades into the background and you become a peaceful, serene person, happy in what you're doing, life has purpose, and everything falls into place naturally. That's magic. That's it. That's how it works.